we have nothing flying in space yet. So I give them all the credit in the world that they're up there and operational, and we have a lot to do. It's risky and a lot to prove over the next couple years to see our satellites fly. Amazon has never flown anything into space yet, so we'll see how it goes.
Good morning and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Christian Davenport, a reporter here covering NASA and the spaceflight industry, and I'm thrilled to be joined this morning by Dave Limp, the Senior Vice President at Amazon for Devices and Services, the man who oversaw the development of the Alexa device. But of course, this morning he's here to discuss satellite, space, and the internet. Dave, good morning. Welcome to Washington Post Live.
Thanks, Christian. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, it's a pleasure. A disclosure, of course, that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. We always point that out. And a note to our audience, we want you to join the conversation. Please tweet to us at Post Live all of your questions and comments, and we'll look forward to going through those. But Dave, I just want to start with you. When you talk about Project Kuiper, what are its main goals and objectives? I wonder if you can give us sort of the big overview.
Yeah, we added a leadership principle last year, which I think was a good one, a new one for Amazon, which says with scale and success comes broad responsibility. And, Amazon's not a small company any longer. And I think as we think about that, when we can find projects that are an intersection of things that we could do, that 5 people in a garage wouldn't be able to do, but that are good businesses, we certainly want to make sure they're good businesses, but that are also good for society, those are the kinds of problems we'd like to attack. And I think Kuiper really fits into that envelope very well. It's a low Earth orbit satellite system that's really about bringing broadband to those people that are underserved or unserved around the world. And we always sort of really quickly go to, oh, that must mean sub-Saharan Africa. That is a problem, and we want to serve there. But you don't have to go far even in the United States to find people that are working off copper that was laid down in the 40s and 50s, 1940s, 1950s, and are running 1 megabit per second if they're lucky. And we can think we can bring broadband to those folks as well.
So you mentioned in that introductory video that obviously you're second to the market here in a way, that Starlink and SpaceX has already leapt out in front. They've got something like 3,500 satellites up, and it seems to me that they've sort of taken a page from Amazon, and that is they've gotten big fast. So I wonder, how do you compete with that?
I think this is one of those things where the headlines would have you think that this is a sports race and there's going to be one winner. There are literally hundreds of millions of customers around the world that don't have access to great broadband. And each of these constellations, and Starlink, I'm sure is one of them. I can certainly speak for Kuiper. They're going to have a limited amount of bandwidth. It's a lot of bandwidth, but it is a limited amount of bandwidth. And I think there's plenty of room for 2 great constellations. And as an Amazon employee, and I really am really looking forward to broadband for more people. We want people to have access to services like Amazon, services like other internet properties. And so I think more constellations is generally good. I do think we have some benefits, though, in ours. I think we've found a way to build the dish that goes into the customer premises, the actual dish that they connect to the satellite network at a much lower cost than anybody has seen before, including Starlink. So I think we'll have some advantages to customers, but in the end, I think there'll be plenty of room for 2 constellations.
I'm curious about that, about the cost and the advantages. Is there any way you could provide some more details about what you're doing to set yourself apart, just in the marketplace generally? I mean, obviously, Amazon's very good at that and has been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are predicated in the Kuiper system. And one of the decisions we made very early on, not to get too technical, but is to build a system that's symmetric using the Ka bandwidth up and down. And so to our base stations, we use Ka, but also to the customer premise, we use Ka. And that obviously came at a cost. We have to fly a slightly larger satellite than others have. We have more power on our bus in the satellite. But the advantage to us was to be able to build a much lower cost, a much more efficient antenna that goes into the customer premise. And remember, we're going to be building tens of millions of those. There's 3,236 satellites, but there's tens of millions of the things that go into people's homes. And so by bringing that price down, and now we think we're under $400 on the bill of materials for that, I think that's a big advantage for our architecture. The second thing I would point out is, Amazon has a very large cloud presence with AWS. And so being able to have our backbone of the internet that is Kuiper basically get quickly into the AWS framework, and that where a lot of web properties are already residing, Netflix and Amazon Video and other types of things, gives us the ability to have lower latency to things in the internet, more security. I think that's another thing in our architecture that I'm really excited about.
So who do you see are the customers? I mean, I've seen some estimates that are 4 billion people worldwide without reliable access to broadband. Where are your customers for that? And I wonder if there are different segments of the population or the business world that you're looking at.
Yeah, I think there's certainly consumers around the world, as you said. I don't know if it's 4 billion, but I certainly think it's hundreds and hundreds of millions. And there it's predicated about getting a global system, a system that is affordable, because you want consumers to be able to have access to this, but not at super pricing. And so I think that's one very large segment of the opportunity. I think there's a big enterprise opportunity out there, both in businesses themselves that might have assets that are in places that they want to track that they can't get to. That could be maritime, that could be large construction equipment out in places that they wouldn't have access to. But it also might be large network operators who want to be able to access a backhaul system that's reliable, that's high speed. We've already announced one of those with a partnership with Verizon, where we're looking at how we can use an enterprise version of the Kuiper antenna as backhaul instead of, say, microwave links or places where you can't even get backhaul today. And then we can get not only broadband to more rural areas, but you can also then get 5G to more rural areas, and that's just good for customers as well.
And we've seen too, I mean, what Starlink has done in Ukraine and the discussion with the Pentagon and their interest in it and the back and forth that they've had with SpaceX. I'm just curious if you think the military is a potential customer for you, and have you had any discussions with them about it?
Yeah, we've had discussions with a bunch of different parts of governments, U.S. government specifically. We did announce one contract with NASA where we're doing some investigations on satellite laser interconnects. So imagine if you could put reliable high-speed lasers on each of these satellites and then interconnect them in space, you could form a mesh network. So we have signed a contract with NASA to investigate that and see what that is. I do think that Amazon in general, it's kind of one of our tenants, believes that technology should be used to help national security. And so to the extent that Kuiper can help, I think we're open to those discussions.
So I wonder too about how you make the business case closed. Amazon has talked about investing $10 billion into the system. I mean, the upfront costs are enormous. I mean, when Elon Musk started Starlink a few years ago, he talked openly about how maybe this would work, maybe it wouldn't. The past, other satellite companies have tried this in decades ago, Teledesic, Iridium, and it didn't work. I'm just sort of wondering, how you see the business case working for Amazon, and does Amazon, in terms of the synergies you have there, help you close that business case?
Yeah, there's no avoiding that the road is littered with LEO constellation ideas that have gone bankrupt in the past. So that is not lost on us. I think one of the things that Amazon has proven throughout the 25 plus years of its history is we are very disciplined on return on invested capital. So now I'm not belittling the risk of a project like this. As I said in that video, we have yet to put anything up in space. Hopefully that's coming very soon. But the business as put down on paper, and with the costs that we see, our antennas are coming, our launch costs, our per satellite costs, and the cost to run the network, all pencil out to be a good business for Amazon. And as I said, very good for customers at a price I think that will be attractive. That being said, I think we have to always be focused on the details in a business like this. We have to be cost conscious. We have to make sure that we're executing at a very high level of reliability, of safety, and that what we kind of promised when we laid down that business model is something that is coming to fruition at every given milestone. We didn't greenlight our launch contracts, which were billions of dollars, until we had a satellite on a bench that seemed to be working, and we had an antenna that seemed to be working. So we have milestones as we go along the way to ensure that we're making progress to what we want to deliver for customers. But we're a few years into this now. I've never been more optimistic, because now you're starting to see silicon light up. You're starting to see the functionality light up. You're starting to see actually manufacturing happening, and that gives you more confidence that you're on path to deliver the system.
Yeah, it sounds like a very Jeff Bezos step-by-step approach. I want to ask you about sort of the timelines and where you are. I mean, we know you've signed, as you mentioned, those major launch contracts with several major rocket launch providers. There's some news out about your expanding your satellite production facility. Sort of give us a sense of what's going on in terms of getting to production and an operational capability.
Yeah, so let's rewind 6 months. Like I said, we had gotten, we're doing a lot of custom silicon. A lot of that custom silicon had gotten back into the labs. We brought it up, and combined with where we thought the antenna was, we felt confident to acquire launch contracts. Launch, especially for heavy lift vehicles, everybody, we see rockets launching every day, which, by the way, is so cool and amazing, and they're landing now. But the fact of the matter is that heavy launch capacity is still pretty constrained, and I think it will be for the coming years. And so we needed to lock down. We have 92 flights locked down with ULA, Blue Origin, Ariane, and that'll give us enough to get the vast majority of our constellation flying. So that's a good milestone as well. And then more recently, we've started now moving into the manufacturing phase of this. Other than Starlink, I never visited their manufacturing plant, but generally the industry is focused, the satellite industry is focused on building 1 or 2 birds every couple of years. To put that in contrast, we're going to have to build 1 to 3 satellites every single day, and so maybe even a little more than that. And so we have to build the manufacturing capabilities that looks more like consumer electronics or automobiles and less like the traditional space industry. And so that the announcement today of acquiring another 172,000 square feet in Kirkland was about building the second phase of our manufacturing. Our first phase is in Redmond. It's up. And so what we're doing now is we've started integration and the final assembly of our first 2 prototype satellites. Those should be done by the end of Q4, and we're in test right now. And then we'll be delivering those to ULA's integration facility in the Cape in Q1 and getting them ready to fly.
You touched on this a little bit in the sort of opening question, but I wonder, how does this fit into Amazon's larger ecosystem of products and services? And I'm just sort of curious, for you, Dave, you've got such a broad portfolio there at Amazon. How much of your time is dedicated to Kuiper?
Let me answer the first question first, and I'll get to your second question. At the fundamental level, foundational level, broadband is what keeps Amazon going, right? If people don't have access to the internet, they can't go to our site to shop. They can't watch Lord of the Rings. An enterprise customer can't get an EC2 instance spun up in AWS. So really, more people having access to broadband spins the Amazon flywheel. It just does. So it's really foundational start there. That being said, I also think there are other good things that are to benefit. One of the biggest ones is the synergy with AWS. We can get bits into AWS's cloud very, very quickly, and that can give us a lot of benefits for a lot of different types of solutions that you think as workloads migrate to the cloud, having this global network that can move bits around the earth very, very fast and then drop them into a data center, an AWS data center. Kind of the ideas when you start positioning it like that are almost limitless. So I think that's another area where I think we have a lot of upside here. That being said, the second question, how much time do I work on it? I've often said I have a great job, one of the best jobs I know of. So I do get to bounce around from different things, self-driving taxis to Alexa to Kuiper. But I'm happiest when I've said it before, when I'm living in the future. And Kuiper is one of those projects that we get to really look out into the future. So I spend a good amount of my time on this project. That being said, all my teams are amazing. Rajiv, who leads the Kuiper team, and everybody that's working for him, they're doing the heavy lifting. I just get to come along for the ride from time to time.
So Amazon, in a way, has had a target on its back for a long time by Congress, regulators who think it's too big, too powerful. If now you become a major internet provider, is there a concern that those concerns from Congress and others are going to even come down harder on you guys?
I have talked to dozens of congressmen and women and senators, and I tell you that they embrace Kuiper as much as anything I have ever seen. And I think they realize that, and I kind of started here, that this is not the type of project that 5 people in a garage can do. 10 people, 100 people. We have 1,000+ people working on this project. And as you mentioned, it's going to be billions of dollars of capital before we start seeing material cash flow. And so you really have to look at a project like this and say, what companies could tackle this problem? And I think that's why, that's a good example where Amazon scale can bring good to society. And when I talk to a congressperson from North Dakota or a senator from Kansas, they know how important broadband is for their constituents. Those rural areas where there's not telemedicine, there's not great access to education online, that we all sort of think is the new normal, but even here in the United States, it's just not. So I think there's going to be a lot of support for this.
Yeah, obviously, providing internet to, areas that aren't served or are underserved can have an enormous impact, and perhaps nowhere greater than, in countries where these oppressive regimes, and we've seen some reporting about the White House potentially interested in using Starlink in Iran. I just wonder if that's something you've been thinking about operating Kuiper in some of these countries, and if you've had any discussions internally or with the government about that, because I imagine that's a very delicate situation to navigate.
Yeah, we're too early at this point to be having detailed discussions about that. But I would say from a macro level that access to broadband is part and parcel to access to information. And when you get information that is not that is not censored, that is the actual truth, then that is the path to freedom. And I was lucky enough to be born in the United States and live in a world that has been free all my life. And sometimes we take that for granted in some of the world events that we see right now. And I could think of nothing more important than helping to get access to information for customers around the world. How we do that and what are the details and the legalities of it, we're too early to be thinking about too much about that. We got to get the system up and working first. But I do believe the moral high ground of access to ground truth information is an important one for society.
Yeah, we have a question from one of our audience members, James Weitzer of Illinois, who wonders about this whole idea about the space environment, about polluting Earth orbit. And when we say LEO, that refers to low Earth orbit. Astronomers have been concerned about these thousands, potentially tens of thousands of additional satellites flooding Earth orbit. What sort of steps will you take to mitigate that or allay those concerns?
Yeah, the biggest concern is reflectivity. It's kind of, think of it as kind of reverse light pollution, that it could interfere. So we're doing 2 things. One, we're working with a set of astronomers to understand their concerns. So we've already started that before we get our first satellite into space. We're talking to them and trying to understand what they have to think what ideas they have, what we can do to mitigate it. Secondly, even on our prototype satellites, we're going to start flying some solutions that we think might mitigate it. I don't know if you'll ever be able to mitigate it 100%. It's a complicated problem depending on where you are, what inclination you're at, where the sun is at. But what you want to try to do is, on an asymptotical basis, kind of minimize the amount of reflectivity. And so even with our first prototypes, we're going to be testing some ideas. I don't know if those will come to fruition. Amazon has a long track record of kind of iterative testing, and but we do believe it's an important thing to realize and also try to mitigate over time.
I wonder what you think about this sort of new space economy. A lot of people are talking about it. There have been some estimates, that the space economy could be worth $1 trillion. But it's interesting to me that you have some of these big companies, even like Amazon, that traditionally is not a space company, now getting into space, seeing a lot of opportunities there. I wonder what you make of the relative health of the space economy in low Earth orbit. Is this something that is really going to be viable?
Well, I think there's lots of things, whether it's LEO or MEO or even GEO. GEO, I don't think is going to go extinct for lots of use cases. I think that space we're kind of, using a baseball analogy, we're at kind of the first batter of the first inning of a baseball game here as it relates to commercialization of space. And for better or for worse, the industry kind of took off a number of decades, and we kind of stalled there for a while on the commercialization of space. That being said, as we move forward and you start thinking about the launch capacity that's going to be added over the next decade or two, with both large vehicles and small vehicles that we're starting to see come to fruition, reusability. If you kind of look at it as kind of how much mass can we put to orbit of all those different types of orbits, and even more to deep space, and contrast that today to where we might be 20 years from now, it's going to be orders of magnitude more mass to orbit per year. And then you can, once you have that, and that resource becomes a little less constrained, that getting a kilogram to any orbit you want to, it opens up your imagination. It's kind of, you begin to think, wow, what are all the different possibilities? Lots of them we're talking about today with broadband and photography and mapping and sensors, but there's all sorts of other things, including, how can we get resources from space and help bring them back for manufacturing and things like that. So I'm very bullish and optimistic because of and by the way, we're riding on the backs of the hard work of decades of work by literally rocket engineers. But if over the next 10 to 20 years, that work's going to come to fruition. You can see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about all these new rockets that are coming online. In fact, the ones that you've chosen to launch Kuiper are all sort of new next generation rockets, but that also means that they haven't flown yet, whether it's ULA's Vulcan rocket or Blue Origin's New Glenn. What is your confidence that these rockets are going to be, flying and becoming reliable in the near term?
Yeah, I think the last part of that question is the most relevant. It's not a question of will they fly, it's just when. It's kind of a timing question. So, and so we hedged our bets a bit. We do, because of the mass and the form factor of our satellites, we do need heavy lift rockets. And so that is a more constrained resource right now to make the economics and the timing and everything that we have, the constraints we have to work. And so, we did what you would do in any business, is we spread the risk around. And we chose multiple launch providers, proven vehicles that we know can fly today that are kind of at the very low end of heavy lift. And we have 9 Atlas V's, some of the last 9 Atlas V's already under contract. That's a proven vehicle. It's kind of at the low end of the lift capacity we like to see. And then, as you said, we've gotten New Glenn and Vulcan and Ariane 6. And so those hopefully come into place. There are also other providers out there that we're open. We have a lot of satellites to put up into space, so we're open to contracting with anyone out there.
Well, that's interesting. Does that include SpaceX? I mean, would you fly on the Falcon 9? That's proven to be one of the most reliable, if not the most reliable rocket out there.
Yeah, yes, we are open to talking to SpaceX. You'd be crazy not to, given their track record here. But I would say Falcon 9 is probably at the low end of kind of the capacity that we need. But as you think about them, getting more Falcon Heavy, but more importantly, as they think about Starship and getting that into production readiness, those become very viable candidates for us as well.
So I just wonder, I mean, you've got all of these satellite constellation companies out there, and for our audience, what's going on is the technology is really going through something of a revolution where, it used to be that a satellite was massive, the size of, say, a garbage truck, but now that can be as small as a loaf of bread or, a small refrigerator. But I just wonder, Dave, in terms of the talent pipeline, because you've got all of these companies, OneWeb, Planet, whether it's remote sensing, imaging, or communications or internet, that are building these satellites, are you able to attract the talent that you need as you're ramping up and really entering what's a critical phase for Kuiper?
Well, so far the answer to that has been yes. I've never seen a team come together so quick with such amazing talent. I mean, it really is pretty stunning, the group of people. Like I said, we're over 1,000 people now. We're continuing to hire. The labor market ebbs and flows, so you never know what things are going to look like as we move forward. But we've assembled a team of incredible engineers, and and the early work was a lot of obviously designing what the payload is going to look like, and getting the silicon kind of validated, simulated, and then off to be taped out. And so that's where we had to get the early talent, and finding those RF engineers, those silicon engineers, those payload engineers for the satellite proved to be the hardest problem. But the team, those are butts in seats. Those are people working, and the fruition of their work is already coming back to the lab. So I'm pretty optimistic about the team we've put together.
And we're coming up at the end of the time. I want to see if I can squeeze in a couple more questions. If I have this right, Dave, you need to buy, to meet the requirements in your FCC license, have about half of your constellation up, or about 1,600 satellites up within the next couple of years. Is that correct? And are you going to meet that goal?
Yeah, we have to have half, as per our FCC license, half our constellation has to be up and operational by July 26. We are on track for that. A lot of that's because of the help of some of our partners. Obviously, we've contracted most recently with ULA, who's been an amazing partner for us, to get a ride with our prototype satellites on the first Vulcan launch, which I think Tori has said is going to be in Q1. And so we're in the process of getting our proto satellites ready, but we're not holding there, given that the schedule we have in front of us. We're in parallel bringing up manufacturing of our, assuming success of our prototype satellites, we're bringing up manufacturing for our production satellites in parallel, and so we're on track to meet that milestone.
So last question, just looking ahead in the future, I mean, a lot of people in space look 40, 50 years out. Let's keep a sort of more realistic timeline, 10 years out in terms of the future of space and where Amazon and Kuiper are in it, what sort of benefits you see. What does that landscape look like when you look around the corner down the road?
Yeah, I think in 10 years from now, we have tens of millions of customers that are on Kuiper system, and that they're enjoying the benefits of, consumers are enjoying the benefits of low-cost broadband in places they could never have gotten it before. I think there are thousands of enterprise customers at that point that are understanding and now inventing with the reality that moving a bit from the far side of the planet to the other side of the planet at the speed of light is the new normal, without having to make fiber hops, and we're able to help those customers as well. And I think we'll be in 10 years, we'll be well into the design of our second generation constellation, assuming success of our first one, which, like all things at Amazon, we're going to learn from what our customers say. We're going to look at what the latest technology looks like and iterate. I think we're building one of, if not the most advanced RF LEO satellite ever built. That being said, I already know we can do better in V2. So as soon as we start launching V1, we'll be ready to start thinking about what the next iteration of this looks like, so improve customers' lives even more 10 years from hence.
Yeah, well, it's all very exciting. Unfortunately, though, that's all the time we have. Dave Lemp, thank you so much for joining us. That was a real pleasure.
Thanks for the time. I had a great time. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. We'd like to invite you to please log in to WashingtonPostLive.com, register for all the upcoming programs that we have. Again, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christian Davenport.